Hello, fourth graders, and welcome to another video science lesson review, test review. Today we are going to be talking about weathering, and so let's go ahead and start off with basically a definition of what weathering is. Now here's a fact. Weathering is the breaking down of rocks. So anytime a rock is eroding or scraping or breaking or being chiseled, you know weathering has taken places. And there's basically two forms of weathering. There is physical weathering or mechanical weathering. That's the same thing. Today we are going to be talking about it in terms of physical weathering, but we just finished watching a brain pot video and they called it mechanical weathering. And then the second form of weathering is called chemical weathering. Now let's go ahead and look at physical weathering first and define what it is. Physical weathering is basically when rock is broken down by touch, okay? So, and that's why I have the hand here so you can kind of see. Now physical weathering basically changes the size and shape of the rock, but it doesn't actually change the rock itself. For example, look at this foam ball. Physical weathering, okay? Physical touch. I am pushing in on this foam ball here. So the foam ball has changed shape. It has changed size because I'm pushing in on it, so it's definitely changed shape. It's changed size. It's a little bit smaller. But it is still foam. The ball itself, the foam itself, has not actually changed. Just its shape and size. Okay? So keep that in mind when we talk about physical weathering. It's only the size and shape. It's not like it's actually changing, like this foam is all of a sudden turning to steel. No, it's still foam. It's not steel. It's not clay. It's just changed size and shape. Now when we talk about chemical weathering, the actual foam is turning into something completely different. The rock is turning into something completely different. It is actually changing inside. That is chemical weathering. Okay, so keep that in mind. Let's look at some examples of physical weathering. One example is called abrasion, and that's when wind basically erodes or chips away or eats away at rock. If I were to blow on my hand for 400 years, and it was constantly blowing on my hand, after a while, my hand would probably start being eroded a little bit. You may even see a small little indention like this because my wind, my air, you can actually feel it on my hand. There is something actually physically touching my hand when wind hits it. Same thing with rocks. When wind is hitting rocks, there is something that's actually hitting the rock. So in this case right here, it's constantly hitting right here, and you can see the rock starts to erode after a while. It starts to break away. And this is called abrasion. That's when wind. Another one is by plants, okay? Basically what happens is plant roots, tree roots, sometimes they get so big, and they don't even really have to be that big, but they can, because they're looking for water and nutrients, they start growing down and out, and they can actually start breaking through the soil and actually even break through concrete. I don't know if you've ever seen that. My sidewalks are paved pretty nice, but maybe like an older neighborhood, you can see trees have actually started to come up through the concrete, and it can actually break it because the roots are so strong. So plants is another physical weather. The other physical weathering is by rain. Same thing, the water just keeps beating down on top of the same area. And we're not talking about just overnight, really. We'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about landslides and that sort of thing. But typically when we talk about weathering, we're talking about a long, slow process. This water just keeps beating down on top of these two little mini mountains, and after a while, the mountain is starting to become smooth because, once again, of the constant eating away and breaking away that the water is doing to this rock. And the last one is called exfoliation. Exfoliation, it's like these rock layers are peeling off like the layers of an onion. So you can see this piece kind of comes over and breaks off, and that maybe cracks another little layer here, and then that layer is going to fall off. And so these layers keep falling off or exfoliating, okay? When sometimes men do it too, but they exfoliate their face. It means they're taking off maybe the top layer of dead skin cells. They're exfoliating, they're taking a layer off. That's kind of the same thing here. The mountain here is taking off layers, okay? So that's exfoliation. Let's see. Oh, another one is by the freezing and thawing. When water freezes, it expands. If you've ever put like a water bottle in the freezer or a soda, if you've ever done that before, the water will actually explode the soda, or the soda inside the can will expand and it can bust through the can. So when you open up the freezer, you can see the can's been split open, or the water will bust through the plastic bottle because, once again, the water has expanded, and so the top may have popped off and that sort of thing. So basically what happens is the water fills into a little crack here. And let's say overnight the temperatures drop and the water freezes. Well, the water, when it freezes, it breaks the sides here and it makes a bigger hole. Well, then the water then seeps into this hole, and then once again the same thing happens at night. The water freezes and it busts an even bigger hole. If that process keeps happening, the freezing and thawing can break and erode these rocks. So that's another form of physical weathering. All right, let's go ahead and talk about chemical weathering. We're going to be talking about two examples here. The red rust on a metal chain, or we're also going to talk about the red stuff that forms in these underground limestone caves. Basically, in both of these, you have the combination of water plus the carbon dioxide that's in air plus the metal equals this rust. So you have water plus the carbon dioxide plus the metal chain equals the rust on this metal chain. This red stuff that develops is actually, it's no longer the metal chain. It's an entirely new substance that has been formed in place of the metal chain. Okay? So once again, this red stuff, it is a chemical change. It is chemical weathering. The red stuff is a completely new substance in place of the metal chain that was there before. Okay? The last one, same kind of thing here, this underground tunnel. You have water plus the carbon dioxide plus the limestone that's in these caves. Those three things, you have this carbonic acid that starts to develop, and this acid eats away at the limestone. And so what happens is you have these big underground caves, and a lot of them, you know, they have the red all over the place. And so that is chemical change. The stuff that is in that cave is an entirely new substance. And there's a good picture in your book about what that carbonic acid looks like. All right. Well, just by way of review, we talked about chemical weathering with the rust and the carbonic acid. We talked about all the different types of physical weathering with exfoliation, rain, abrasion, plants, freezing and thawing. Oh, we didn't talk about this up here. How are these different soil layers formed? Much of this is kind of a review of sedimentary rocks, but through whatever means, maybe a tree dies and rots, and so that kind of goes into the soil. Or an animal dies, and so its skeleton bones lock in there. or maybe by erosion and weathering, you have some other rocks that kind of form. After a while, these layers of soil and rock start to pile on top of one another, and that's how these different layers of soil are formed. Each layer basically has its own different characteristics based upon what was going on at that time. Each of these layers are formed over thousands of years. This isn't, once again, it's not like, I mean, out on the playground we have one layer, and maybe the next day there is another layer, but that layer is really small. These thick layers were formed over thousands of years, long time. So let's say we had Horizon C in 100 AD. You can see all the rocks that are in that layer because it's really close to the bedrock, which is close to, you know, the hardest stuff underneath our soil. Then in Horizon B, you know, 1,000 years later, there's quite a few less rocks because they've been weathered and broken down. You can see some humus in this layer. Humus are dead, rotted animal bones and carcass. And then, you know, another 1,000 years go by, stuff happened, stuff got piled on top, rocks got eroded even more. And so in Horizon A, you don't see very many rocks at all. Maybe you see a little bit more humus because, you know, something happened in that area. And so these layers start to form. So that's what that is up there. Those are called soil horizons. And this is all about weathering. Hope you've enjoyed this lesson. And you're looking at your notes while you're watching it. It'll definitely help you for the test. And I look forward to seeing you guys in class.